Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining Archangel Alts, and let's get into our next lesson. Pretty cool. Yes. Still hovering in this range. Just beyond the 313 alerts. Pi. 3.14. 314 on the day before Pi Day. I would rather see it happen today than to have to wait for Pi Day. But here we are, and we've gone over our main chart. We've gone over the candles. We've gone over an overview of our indicators. We have covered volume. We have covered MACD. We have covered Bollinger. And now we are moving on to our StochRSI. This is our Stochastics Relative Strength Index. So what, you may ask, are stochastics? What is a relative strength index? What are these things? Am they? So, once again, here we are. And you've got two different lines representing two different periods of time. They're averaging over a long period of time. And they come together to give you a very accurate assessment of, based on the past, what is likely to happen when your altcoin comes into a certain position in real time at present. And all these different indicators, you can look at them from the same period of time as your candles. They will shift to something as accurate as possible to that different length of time. So even though they're averaging from many days, weeks ahead of time, earlier, they're going to show you a predictive measure of what that means for now. So this one on its own can seem more complicated than some of the others, where with MACD, there's always this kind of oscillating up and down going on, and very often it tends to track something that, it makes logical sense to what you're seeing with the candles, the ups and downs of the candles. With the stochastics, it's very important in understanding them to see them in comparison to something else that is moving in average. You can see that these two have some in common here. These two have some in common. You can see the ups and downs there, but very often it'll look like this is doing much larger patterns than what you see happening in the volume part of the MACD. And maybe it looks more exaggerated than what you see happening in the candles. So if you don't understand what the Stochastic Relative Strength Index is showing you, that can seem contradictory or confusing, understandably so. So don't expect the stochastics, the StochRSI, to be doing the exact same shape as everything else. And that's one of the reasons that it gives you unique information that you can do something with. So as you compare all these things together, we see that, an example, we have the MACD crossover up here. That's going to be, the end of your, looking for an opportunity to buy in. And as it comes down here, you're looking for a buy-in point, which is not always going to give you exactly what you're looking for. But you can see that, there was at least a little bit of that same transformation going on in here. With the stochastics, you're looking at a relative strength index. This is giving you a range. It's providing an actual range with a value attached to it. And when you are, once again, you're looking at overbought, oversold. When you get beyond a certain point down here, it's kind of telling you that the likelihood it increases exponentially that it's going to be the right time for it to bounce back and change directions. So we take these indicators as good reasons to find an entry point and an exit point, where to go in to start the purchasing process, and to wait until it goes up to a certain part before we've reached our minimum profit, and then decide from there, based on the information in front of us, whether there's a likelihood or even a possibility of it going up from there. So relative strength index is, when it crosses over this point and it's saying that, we've now bought, more than what the average is telling us the value is. You can see over here that number is in this line right here is 80. This line should be 20, or yes, 20, 80, 20. So you could see things anywhere in this range, or even staying way up high in this range. It doesn't have to go all the way up and down. It can hover in here for a certain period of time. It could stay up here for a certain period of time. And, I'll usually, mention this kind of like as a double up. You kind of expect to see up, down. But when things are going really well, the volume's picking up. StochRSI has given you an indicator that it's staying within this range. You'll see that it stops doing the downward pattern and there's just a lot of strength going on. Either fuel is in a point where it was already headed in an up pattern and Bitcoin went up at the same time. And so that encourages people to just keep buying more and more. And it doesn't catch up to them to realize that they've overbought it for a longer period of time. So the way that the StochRSI oscillates, you're, in the same way that I was saying that you don't necessarily always see the same crossover. The main thing to understand with them is this constant up and down movement is not going to be the same visualization as your up and down in your volume. Positive green volume buying in, negative red volume selling off. You're going to see the likelihood, based on these numbers, of whether it's overbought and oversold at that period of time. And you can see there's very little movement through here, but it's just as likely to come to a point where it's going to change. And the relative strength, being the average over time, is comparing what's happening in the activity right here to what happened a while back. So, one of the self-fulfilling prophecy aspects of that is the more people that are watching either MACD or StochRSI or Bollinger or all of them, the more likely the accuracy is going to be, because they're all watching for the right time for something to happen. This was not giving you a perfect indication that this was going to be a perfect buy-in point and it was just going to go way up. In the same way that, you don't always know what the next one is going to do. But the more information you have together, you can take what this is saying here, what this is saying here, what this is saying here, and just what your candles are doing. Add that to the volume, and very interesting. If the volume is continuing to be low, I'm not necessarily expecting that it's suddenly going to pop up. This is actually pretty big in comparison right there. So, we're very happy to see the volume go up here. But you will notice that it'll stay within a certain range longer, the longer that pattern is staying the same. So, when it came down to this relative strength down here, it did not immediately, hover into an average, because that's not what was happening. This was weakening because the volume was going down. We were not seeing, a change in a big sell-off or buy-in here. And so this was staying in a pretty low, as it averaged down, it became less and less and less likely that it was, going to start showing a positive trend and it would be a good time to buy in. But it did do exactly what we would expect in that case, which is it finally reaches a point where there's, there's going to be a change, a shift. We started to see that in the volume first, and then it just increased. So yes, it's predictive in the sense that it will tell us where the pattern has already come and where it's headed, but it's not going to be the first thing to jump. And a lot of people, they'll tweak EMA or MA, the moving average or the exponential moving average, until they get that information from it. I prefer to see these in comparison to one another. And so, you can kind of see sometimes the MACD is giving, the first signs of something that's about to happen. Sometimes the volume is the first sign that something's about to happen. Sometimes the StochRSI is going to be the first sign that something's going to happen. So that is your Stochastics Relative Strength Index. And there's without it, there's with it. That's how you're going to see it. So that's what this is. That's what this is doing. And it's just another one of those things that kind of gives you a predictive measure. It's not necessarily going to move exactly up and down the same amount that you see the candle movement, but it is measuring the likelihood of the next part of the pattern being a good entry point. And as it tracks, it's going to peak out at the right time, and therefore you're only going to see a certain height when it does those things. If it's just not gaining any more traction, it's going to start to lose and cross over and do exactly the same thing that we saw with these two lines with the MACD. But it's at a different average time, and it's always oscillating up and down. When it's high towards the 80, that's the end of a sell-off period. When it's low towards the 20, that tends to be your buy-in period. So that's how that works. That's the StochRSI. I find it the most interesting, the most useful when I have it with the MACD. The only negative side to that is, you lose more space for the other indicators by having both of those, but I much prefer that to an overlap. Sometimes you'll see stochastics put right on top of the candles, which I much prefer having the Bollinger Bands and the VWAP. So I think you get a really great combination of the visualization of these things in the client and in the browser versions of the Binance Exchange. So visualization is very good here. All right, I hope that you found this helpful and useful and interesting, and on to the next one. For now, Archangel Alts out.